Here we're going to talk about type classifications. Now, as you know, the study of typography and the art of typography is centuries old, based upon handwritten work that scribes would create to make books. And it wasn't until the 1400s that Johannes Gutenberg, among others, started to develop the technology of letter forms on reusable pieces of metal and wood that became the study and the art of typography as we know it today. So in an effort to take all of the millions of typefaces and fonts that have been designed over the centuries, there are type classifications that are really helpful to know and understand for type choosing and basically getting to know different fonts and how they can be applicable and have a certain look for different projects. On the left of the screen, you'll see a list of some of the traditional classifications along with some of the more modern ones that have developed fairly recently. And we have visual examples of some of the more traditional ones here. You'll see in red a short description of what makes the different classification unique, and then the font that the examples are set in is listed here next to the letters. This one here is called Humanist or Old Style, and Garamond as well as Sabon that we see here are two examples of this classification. Now this is a very traditional, actually, one of the older classifications. This is really taken from the handwritten letter forms that the scribes would use, and also from Roman stone carving. You can see that the serifs are fairly sharp. It's a clean look. It's fairly I don't want to say blocky, but it's not quite as smooth as some of the others, yet it is a very readable and attractive classification here that has a somewhat of a historical feeling to us. I think partly because of the way these thicks and thins work together. You get kind of a sense of stone carving from these letter forms here. Over here, this is the transitional classification, and this is a lot younger, mid-18th century. Okay, so the 1700s. John Baskerville designed this font, and we're familiar with it today. You can see that it's slightly different from the old style. The serifs are flatter on the bottom. There's more of a rounded sense of the serifs on the lowercase a. It's a little bit more flowing, a little bit wider on the a here, a little bit more readable. They're both very readable, but this one has a little bit more of a flow to it. So this is considered transitional. This is considered modern here. The Bodoni and the Dido typefaces that you see in some of the Art Deco typefaces you might be familiar with are an example of the modern classification. Now, it's not that modern to us. It was early 19th century, but that's fairly young in the history of typography. You see extreme thicks and thins, really thin, delicate serifs, very dramatic, and this must have been quite a breakthrough when these fonts were first designed. This one here, Clarendon, is an example of Egyptian or slab serif, and you can definitely see the thick, blocky serifs that are being used here. It's a very bold and dramatic typeface. Look at the circle there on the top of the serif of the lowercase a. This is a great font for headline use. It's not so good for body copy because it's so thick and blocky. But slab serif fonts are used in they're great for industrial ads. The Victorians used them a lot in their broadsides and in their advertising, and it can be very successful when used in the correct way. These three classifications here at the bottom are three different versions of what we call sans serif. Now, you're familiar, or you're becoming familiar with serif and sans serif typefaces. Sans means without, so any font that does not have the little feet at the bottom is known as a sans serif typeface. And we have Gill Sans down here, which is based on the Humanist old style fonts, but it doesn't have any serifs. So this is a modern take on those older Humanist typefaces. This transitional here, which is our old friend Helvetica, very popular, has a clean modern look. The counters and the X height is very large on these letters, and it makes it very easy to read. And as you probably know by now, this is probably the most famous typeface in the world, and it's used all over the place. It's extremely easy to read, very, very good shelf life on this font here. Futura is an example of geometric sans serif, and with Futura you get a real geometric sense from the letters. The O, for instance, is a perfect circle. The A is there's sharp points on the top, just like a triangle. And this is very much a clean, modern, geometric-based typeface designed by Paul Renner in 1927. You don't see examples of these here, but other examples of classifications would be decorative fonts, such as you might find on free font websites. A whole classification of handwritten and script type is available, and there's a lot of uses for that. In the more modern age, in our time, we are starting to see digital type that's based on pixels and then developed into more digital screen-based font applications. And then novelty categories such as deconstruction or grunge typefaces, which are very popular and very effective for certain types of treatments. So this is a quick overview of different classifications. It helps to understand them, so when you go to pick fonts for your projects, you know basically you can draw on a historical basis for some of your font choices.